Hello everyone, Nar here. Today I'll be playing as my Brewmaster monk. I'm gonna decide which key to choose whenever I cut the video. However, I'll start with the going over the basics of Brewmaster, as not a lot of people tend to lean towards Brewmaster. Just like Blood DK, it can be a bit complex to pick up. Especially once you see my action bar, you'll see that there's a bit of button bloat, but everything seems to have a reason to be pressed. So going straight into it, I'll go over my gear. It's all very standard. I followed a best in slot guide to target farm a lot of the gear that I have. Going over my stats, I have 36% stagger. I do have my buzzing runes on as well as my versatility pot, so I'm sitting at 37% crit and 19% versatility. And the biggest thing for Brewmaster is they aren't too reliant on secondary stats, which is a good and a bad thing, as they are very easy to gear up because it is mostly item level. However, the versatility can help out a lot in decreasing your damage taken, as well as the crit can help out with having your expel harm critting for a lot more often, as it will absorb all of the healing spheres around you whenever you press it. So any healers out there that have healed Brewmasters, it does kind of feel like healing a Blood DK. As you will see, once they cap out their stagger, they will start to lose health very quickly. However, they are able to mitigate their stagger cap by clearing 50% of their stagger instantaneously with a 2-charge, 14-second recharge Purifying Brew. And every time you keg smash, it will reduce the cooldown of all of your brews by an additional 3 seconds. So some may think haste should play a big part, however it doesn't, as this is generally the only ability that relies on haste. That is why we tend to lean more towards crit and versatility. So going over my gear, I have very basic, like I said, best in slot gear. I have the Horn of Valor, Windscar Whetstone. I managed to roll a socket on the Jeweled Signet of Melandris here. And again, I have everything socketed with crit and versatility. I managed to make a ring, boots, a lariat, and both of my weapons with all of the sparks of ingenuity there. As you'll see, aside from the set bonus pieces, I stacked as much as I could into crit and verse. This cape just rolled really high out of the vault one week, so I decided to go for it. 211 versatility, as well as a maxed out 13 out of 13 cape. Can't go wrong with that. And I had been, before the season was up, grinding out more of the concentrated primal focuses to be able to get everything above 405 item level. I do, however, have enough for another regular primal infusion. However, all of my crafted gear is already above 400, unfortunately. So going over talents here, it's a very standard kit. The only thing that I changed from one of the builds that I followed was a generous pour. I felt like having just a bit more mobility by putting it in improved roll. Having 3 rolls can kind of just help me get around the field a lot easier, as well as any potential back pulls by pug members or just accidental walking around potentially pulling something, I need to go from the front line to the back line very quickly. Unfortunately for the Brewmaster side of the tree, there is not a lot of ability to negotiate any sort of other build, as the nodes that I didn't take are a bit underwhelming here. Sure, healing elixir is great. It's a 30-second recharge for 15% of your max health. However, your expel harm here has not only a 50% chance to crit, but also it has the ability to heal for 100% more based on your missing health. And you're thinking to yourself, well, 100% of 12,000 is only 24k. However, if you see at the bottom of the explanation there, it draws in the positive chi of all of your healing spheres on the ground to increase the healing of expel harm. So whenever you use expel harm, and there will be a counter if you see later in the video of how many healing spheres are on the ground so you can keep track of how much you're absorbing, the healing spheres will also be affected by the strength of spirit talent here, as well as profound rebuttal. So, like I said earlier, it can feel like healing a blood decay whenever you are healing a Brewmaster, as if I get a sudden spike in damage, but I have 5 healing spheres on the ground, or even I have healed to full with as little as 2 healing spheres, they will go from 20% health to 100% health very quickly. And just going over these other basic talents, everything plays into itself. This talent right here, Zen Meditation, I almost always forget that I have it, and the only reason that I take it is because there's no other way to get to this side of the tree. Sure, it's great if you are taking heavy AoE damage, but in dungeons, unfortunately, there's not really much use for it, as it instantly stops channeling the second that you are hit by a melee attack, or even if you move. And there's not many situations in which you will be taking heavy AoE damage where the boss isn't hitting you. So unfortunately, the 60% damage taken buff, will not really come in handy. Other things such as shadowboxing, Dredge, you will be taking that on even Mistweavers and Windwalkers. Facepalm, I swapped out from Weapons of Order. I know it seems like a weird pick, but I just, again, with the button bloat, it was very hard to already fit it on my bar, as almost every one of these abilities will be pressed at least once during my dungeon delving adventures. A lot of this other stuff is just giving bonuses to Purifying Brew or your stagger bonuses. Another one to kind of mix up the playstyle of Brewmaster is Blackout Combo. So whenever you use Blackout Kick, you can enhance one of your abilities. The one that I mostly use it for is the Keg Smash. So if I Blackout Kick, then Keg Smash, it'll add an additional 2-second reduction to all my brews. So instead of a 3-second reduction on all of my brews, it goes to 5 seconds, which can be great in a pinch. Everything else is very, very standard. Some of the talents can be a bit underwhelming. The Breath of Fire enhancements here are very fun while leveling as you get it, and resetting the cooldown of your Breath of Fire is just great for mixing things up. Keg Smash in the Breath of Fire is just so fun. And a big 2 talents to watch out for on this tree are the Celestial Brew and invoke Nuzao the Black Ox. With Celestial Brew, this plays into giving you a big absorb shield depending on how much stagger you purified. So you never want to hit this before you purify your stagger, as you will be losing out on an enormous damage shield. So instead of 82,000, you could potentially be looking at an over 200k absorb shield, which is great in fights where there is a tank buster and you can feel as though you have a pretty much 36-second cooldown on a defensive. And with Invoke Nuzao the Black Ox, this is very good in big pulls, as it not only damages everyone around you, but it will help by taking 25% of the damage delayed by stagger will go to Nuzao himself, and you just won't even see that damage, which is great. Everything else in the tree, again, it's pretty much take it or leave it. Anything that I haven't taken is just seriously not worth taking. Weapons of Order, however, just taking the base level talent. Like I said, I swapped out Facepalm for Weapons of Order. Weapons of Order is very strong if you are extremely comfortable with Brewmaster. I feel like I haven't reached a master's level playstyle with Brewmaster. I have hit 2100 on this character for the season. However, getting Weapons of Order maximized potential is still a bit beyond me. I know it very much is use a keg smash, then use this because it'll reset, and then just continually try to keg smash as much as possible for 30 seconds and stack your damage. But I have so many cooldowns to maintain, and I don't really use any weak auras to help me keep track of them. It can be a bit tough to know when this is up and ready to go for some more DPS. That is why I tend to choose more towards Tiger Palm, because it will play into helping me get my brews sooner, even if it is by only 1 additional second. Because as a tank, that 1 second could mean death or a potential death for a party member. And anything else in the left side of the tree is either getting a basic passive like 4% increased damage dealt, or, you know, reducing the cooldown of paralysis. There aren't many game changers here. The only one that I could say is maybe a game changer is Ring of Peace, because that is extremely helpful on Sanguine weeks. I'm sure a lot of you that are more comfortable with doing high level mythics know that either having a druid or a A-bomb limb DK or a monk with Ring of Peace can make Sanguine an absolute breeze. And I tend to take it in situations as I can knock around caster packs even without Sanguine around or needed to be worried about. It can help, say you see an enemy over here and they are just endlessly casting, but you need the pack to be closer. You can cast it here and they will bounce consistently, not able to cast until they're outside of the ring. And everything else is very standard to pick up in the leveling process and doesn't really affect too much of the play style. And we will get right into it once I find a group for the key we're gonna do. Alright everyone, for starters, unfortunately I had some recording problems, so I wasn't able to get the first part of the dungeon, but there isn't much to explain for Wise Mari. It's obviously rotate your kicks, make sure that Hydra Lance doesn't go off just to give your healer some breathing room. in case anyone seems to not either know the mechanics or just, you know, messes up the mechanics here and there, so they can get those burst heals off as needed. But while we go through the motions with Wise Mari here, the first part of the dungeon has the hydromancers, those elementals. Those can be kind of tough because they cast Tainted Ripple, which can only be dodged by line of sight. So the only way to dodge that, if you are tanking them on the edge of the wall, how there's that first corner to turn left into the first hallway. If you tank the elemental next to that corner, then your range DPS and healer can actually dip around that corner as he's casting. That way they can ignore that AoE dot very easily. As you see here, during the fight, we actually had our healer and one of our DPS go down. Unfortunately, I believe one of the DPS messed up the mechanic placing the water down, so it just kind of messed up the rotation whenever he was doing washed away. Another trick for whenever you are going to fight the last pack before you get to Wise Mari is to see if you can lock down one of the casters that end up casting the bubble burst, as it would just help out a lot, because it's kind of hard in a pug to maintain a kick pattern that will, I guess the best term would be a coordinated kick pattern, so that all of the kicks have been accounted for, so that there's no overlapping, and then the correct ability will get kicked. But Wise Mari finished it. Me, the DPS, and the healer. Going into the Haunting Shaw, how I like to handle this one is going straight into it. If we can kill him before he gets his haunted scream off, then great, but I usually will not pull into these two before that scream is kicked, because this pack can be very dangerous, as once you get the little torch thrown on you, your health will start to like spiral downwards very fast, as that torch will at higher keys need a defensive for sure. However, I don't know if anyone saw that, but I used diffuse magic whenever I got the torch sent on me, and it actually flung the debuff onto one of the pandas that I was targeting. So that is how diffuse magic can come in handy. As long as you know the dungeon and know what debuff certain monsters can give you, you can kind of hold on to that diffuse magic to be able to do not only a little extra damage, but also save you from taking a lot of damage. A lot of the philosophy going into these pulls is, one, trying not to overpull, as a lot of these packs in the Temple Jade Serpent can just be very deadly, as they give a lot of percent, so they have to have a lot of mechanics. As you'll see here, we actually have a butt pull of the crane, which is somewhat unavoidable if you pull the Shaw back enough. However, I would usually pull the crane anyways once the kick from the Shaw has gone out on his Haunted Scream, just because the crane isn't too much to worry about. He has a tank buster that you'll generally have to mitigate decently hard in higher keys, but nothing too crazy in like a 15 or lower. And then going into this next pack, you really have to watch out for the beetle and the cat. The beetle has a move that is an AoE that just does a lot of damage if he's not stunned consistently. And then the cat obviously has an interruptible cat nap, where if he's not interrupted out of it, then he will regenerate all of his health pretty much, because it ticks up, I think, like 10% per second of his maximum health. And then overall, just keeping the flow of the dungeon. If you see as the tank that the healer has his mana almost at full, you could just start to kill that book just to start the RP. Saves you maybe like 10-15 seconds or so. And on these two, I'll usually tell the DPS to make sure to swap at 7 stacks. I know a lot of people like to do 6 stacks, but at 7 stacks you really guarantee that if everyone swaps at the right time, you can still squeeze out just a little bit extra DPS. Nothing too crazy on this boss. You see my stagger bar doesn't really move too much on bosses. There's very few bosses that'll actually cap out my stagger bar, as it's more of something that gets capped out whenever I'm fighting a lot of mobs. And coincidentally, this unfortunately makes my Celestial Brew, the brew that gives me a shield, somewhat useless, as I won't be able to use Purifying Brew enough to give me a big enough absorb shield in case I needed it, so I'll have to rely more on my defensives, which will only really be popped in an emergency situation with some of these bosses, as I just don't take too much damage, because the priest is doing a phenomenal job just passively healing. I believe he's a disciplined priest, so it's pretty easy for him to just constantly heal. And then also, as I spoke about earlier, I have my Expel Harm, so it's very easy for me to just self-sustain a lot of the damage that I take, especially if it's negligible. So as we finish up, if I know the dungeon well enough, I'll try to jump ahead, start the pull, get him into position. With these Shaws, I obviously, with any mob that you're tanking, always tank him away. Of course, with this one, he targets a random player, shoots his flame. With the little Shaws, they have 0 aggro on you whenever they spawn. So it's best to preemptively start spamming some sort of AoE ability if possible, so that you can gain aggro on them as they're spawning. And they don't disappear once the mob dies, so unfortunately you do have to either carry them with you into the next pull or just kill them before the next pull. They do a small AoE blast that I don't think can be avoided by line of sighting, so you have to make sure that as you get them killed to make sure that everyone's at least at half health or higher. Going into this room can go very south very quickly. So if possible, you try to pull them into this little corridor here, and then pull them back slowly as the Shaws that cast the Dark Claw, they put up those purple little balls to avoid. And then of course you have to interrupt the Defiled Mistweaver, because her casting that Defiled Mist on someone is absolutely deadly. And you can see me struggling with the point of view camera. This dungeon is definitely annoying in terms of the trees and the line of sight and all that. So as we're continuing to go, making sure we interrupt not only the Defiled Mist now, but now we have to make sure that the Scream is interrupted. You can see me rotating through, casting Keg Smash, the Breath of Fire, purifying my Stagger, and then eventually, after a couple purifies, I'll pop my Celestial Brew just for a big ol' Absorb Shield. But overall, you see my health very spiky, but even with one, maybe two healing orbs, I can really top myself off from even at half health. And as you see on the meters over there to the right, with the healing done, my meters count absorb shields along with my healing, and certain fights I will be pretty close to catching up to the healer, as I'm just able to really self-sustain pretty well in some of these battles. The DPS potential for Brewmaster is also very high, especially if you bring Weapons of Order, because the Weapons of Order debuff that you put on enemies, it stacks up to 4 times, and it increases all damage you do, not just damage done from Keg Smash. Here I end up losing a bit of my composure because I saw the infestor there. He got butt pulled by the hunter, unfortunately. And I just wasn't paying attention. The Dark Claw got me, and then I just wasn't paying attention to my defensives. So unfortunately, I got killed doing the little walk of shame here. Thankfully, however, though, the hunter and the priest, I believe, end up kiting them backwards. So we don't end up losing the pull, thankfully enough, and as a monk you have so much mobility, you're able to get back quickly, even in a big walk back like Temple of Jade Serpent can be. You're able to just get back very quickly, probably almost faster, if not just as fast as a demon hunter, a vengeance demon hunter. But as you see, the priest and the hunter held on to aggro long enough that I was able to catch up, and they had the mob more than halfway killed, which was amazing. A great walk on their part. And then now it's just cleaning this up, and I believe the paladin died on my run back, so we'll have to wait for him before we get into the boss fight here. And with this boss, I know that I've seen some testing on it about how if you keep her facing the absolute same direction, it's still random where the flames pop up, but every time I have done this boss and I have kept her in the same facing position, she will always shoot the flames in the same position. Especially on the Jade Essence flames, as those flames leave little trails on the ground that can be quite deadly. So what I'll usually do is I'll pick a direction, and whenever I see her do the Serpent Strike or the Jade Serpent Strike, I will just back up a little bit, because by the time that the strike goes out, you have about a second or two to back up out of the serpent kick that comes. And then that way you can just step right back in whenever she shoots the flames. And I've done this all season, and every time you'll see I keep her in the same position, I walk forward, and then the very next time that she does it, those flames will shoot in the same trail that she just did. And of course there's obviously some micro movements here and there, but you get the point. I barely moved her. She shot it in the same trail, same X pattern. And she'll do it here again, even though she's moved a little bit further down. So it's a lot easier on the DPS, especially the ranged DPS, to kind of dodge, bob, and weave. Unfortunately, there were 3 thunderings right on top of me, so I couldn't keep her exactly where I wanted her, but I still managed to get the flames somewhat in the best spot. And whenever she's doing the Jade Serpent strike, it is very pertinent to either pop a defensive if you have one, or to have healing on standby if you're a DK or a paladin as well, because getting the healer to heal through the Jade Serpent strike is very, very intense for them, especially if you have no mitigation, because they have to not only heal you to full, but they also have to overheal you to get through all of that negated healing. So overall, very good fight. Paladin lost his life, unfortunately. But another thing, whenever she's in dragon form, you can dodge the fire that spews out, even just by a little bit of sidestepping. It shoots out in a bit of a weird cone pattern, but for the most part, as long as you're directly to the side of the dragon, you'll be able to dodge that fire completely. And these pulls here are some of the deadliest end running pulls. Sorry, run killing pulls, because if they're not pulled correctly, or they are a bit staggered on their interrupt patterns, especially the pack there in the back with the 2 water speakers, those can be very bad if both of the tidal bursts go off at the same time. So here we at least have enough DPS to not really have to worry too much. And as you'll see in the next pull, I kind of botched the pull a little because I tried paralyzing one of the water speakers, but I didn't communicate to my team what I was going to do. So I was going to try and paralyze the far left one, pull the Mistweaver, and then go around the corner. But unfortunately, the water speaker decided to cast Tidal Burst almost immediately, and the healer had to heal through that, and then the other one casted it right whenever the paralysis broke. So absolutely unfortunate RNG on that one. Thankfully though, you see, as I mentioned earlier, with the Ring of Peace technique, since there's so many casters here, I was able to just bounce them, interrupt their cast for a little bit there. Unfortunately, I think another Tidal Burst went off, or the Defiled Mist wasn't kicked, and the healer ended up dying there. So on this pull right here, this pull is absolutely atrocious and has killed a lot of my high level runs on my main prot paladin. But as a monk, I am able to paralyze any type of monster, so I'm able to take out one of the Shahs that does the Dark Claw attack, which is the deadly attack. And here, I believe the Haunted Shah doesn't get his scream interrupted. I was just a bit too far away, and I think the DPS were distracted in trying to CC some of the other ones, but since I have such excellent mobility as a monk, I'm able to roll twice, get out of the way, no Dark Claws are able to hit me, the priest is able to get me back up, and the Haunting Shah goes down. I'm able to roll into someone who wasn't able to clear their Thundering, so we were able to clear that. And another thing about the Shahs that do the Dark Claw, it actually has a range to it, so they sit there and cast it, and you're able to backstep out of it. So you can actually dodge that as long as you keep backstepping. And then of course you have the Infestor, which is pretty tough whenever he summons the minions and everyone's on the verge of dying because of everything else. So the minions will usually either start losing aggro on you and attacking your party members, or they'll just straight up start dying too quickly and exploding and killing your party before you're able to really do anything about it. And overall, that was very clean. The only thing that didn't get interrupted was the scream, but we managed to pull ahead, get out of it. Healer was amazing. Bounced everyone back to full. And now we're going into the boss. The only thing I'd say about this boss is if you have any way of getting rid of the debuff, the touch of nothing debuff, it would be a very good time to use that whenever you get it on you. I know if you're a Windwalker, you also have access to diffuse magic, and yes, you can diffuse magic the touch of nothingness and put it on the boss. Here, if you see that everyone's kind of spread out on the first time that the shades go out, especially in a pug group, it's always good to say, hey, everyone stack on the tank and face the boss, because the spirits will actually fall out of you backwards. So they'll come out of your back and shoot out of your back. So if everyone stacks up and they all shoot out your back, some strategies in a more coordinated group, especially if you have a monk in your group, you can actually have everyone stand on the tank, and then whenever all the spirits come out, you can put the ring of peace right in the center of everyone, and it'll bounce the spirits away so they can't attack, but the melee in your group will still be able to hit them because they technically still be close enough. So that's one way to avoid the damage. The other way in a normal group would be to just rotate stuns as best as you can, because these spirits hurt, and especially when there's still a touch of nothingness up, it can be very difficult on the healer depending on what type of healer you have. I know that Mistweavers can kind of struggle with AoE healing. Overall, we're doing this fight pretty cleanly. Nothing really too much to worry about. This is one of the few bosses where his melee attacks actually start to overwhelm my stagger bar pretty often. So I'm constantly having to just cycle my defensives consistently, as well as purifying my stagger. And as you see there, I was able to clear and quickly roll out of the touch of nothingness, thanks to the superior mobility of Monk. And as we finish up here, if you have any comments, or if you liked or disliked the video, feel free to give me a follow, subscribe, hit the notifications. I'm looking forward to doing more of these in Season 2, and if you have any tips, let me know.